subscribe and click the bell icon to turn on notifications.
We've made the files the instructor uses in this tutorial available for free. Just click the link below in the video details to get these.
Hello everyone and welcome to this Introduction to InDesign class. My name is Dave Casuto and I will be your instructor for this course. Well, who is this class for? Well, this class is pretty much for everyone at every level. Even though this is an introduction class, this is good for beginners, for intermediate level, for advanced folks, because you'll all learn a little bit of something. And if you've worked with Adobe products, including Photoshop and Illustrator, you'll see that there's some overlap, but there's a lot you'll be able to learn as well. So what are we going to cover in this class? We do start with the basics to try to understand the workspace and basically understanding what the panels are and how we can customize some of these panels, but really understanding what they do, but then being able to personalize your whole experience so then you can come back to it over and over and over again to have that much more productivity. But very quickly we get into working with creating brand new documents, creating a poster, using some of these InDesign elements like images and shapes and color, and of course typography. So we get pretty good into typography working with some of our basic level typography tools like font and spacing and alignment and things like that. But we do understand things like tracking. We get into leading, what these things mean, but also very importantly, we get into styles, namely paragraph styles and character styles, which is going to help you be much more efficient and much more consistent with your design and your workflow. And in terms of images, we get into styles, we get into object styles, we get into special effects, and then of course when we're working with text boxes it's the same thing because those are also different objects and we'll work with styles on that regard as well. Okay, but we are also going to get into the very important parent pages, which is really going to allow you to be much more productive and much more consistent with your workflow and your output. And then finally, when you do your output, we're going to show you how to create PDFs and also export and package your documents. But that's really just the beginning. We're going to cover so much, a lot of little nuances all throughout. I teach you a lot of good keyboard shortcuts, how to be more efficient, and a lot of tips and tricks and tools of the trade. All right, so have fun. We'll see you in the first lesson, and thanks everybody. The first thing that we're going to begin with is understanding the InDesign workspace. So currently you will see that I have a workspace here called Essentials. So if you look over in the upper right hand corner of your InDesign window, you may see something that says Essentials. You may see some of these other preset workspaces. Now for the purposes of our instruction and for the purposes of the rest of the class, but also for the purposes of how it would be best for you to work as a beginner, I suggest you go to the Essentials workspace. So if I click on Essentials, or if I click on the drop down here and I choose Essentials, and then after that, just to be safe, choose Reset Essentials. That is going to make sure that all of us are on the same page, the same workspace, we're looking at everything the same way. So what is the workspace? Well, the workspace is complete with panels and different toolbars that's going to allow us to really start off in a certain way to be able to have all of the different tools and tasks and icons and all kinds of different commands available to us very quickly and easily that we need. Now you will notice that there are other ones like book and typography and touch and things like that that you may use at a future time, but at this point we're just going to stick with the essentials. Now we are going to learn how to customize all of the workspace items and bring what we call panels very soon. But let's at least make sure we start off with that. Now let's get a little tour of what we're looking at here and also start off with some minor customization and then go from there. All right, so on the left hand side you're going to see one of our more commonly used panels, which is going to be our toolbar on the left hand side. And what I'm going to do initially is just click on that little double arrow right there to make it so this toolbar becomes two columns. And you're going to see that all the columns now become a little bit more accessible. Now all of these do have tooltips built into them, so if you move your mouse over them you'll be able to see what they do. And you'll also notice that in parentheses it tells you the keyboard shortcut. Now, there's no control or command or anything. It's just those if it says so. So it's just going to be the A key, or this is going to be the T key, just right on your keyboard. Okay, so there's no modifier or anything like that. And you're going to learn plenty of those all throughout this course. Okay, now we also want to note that we have these other panels on the right-hand side. So you'll notice here I have the Properties panel, I have the Pages panel, and I have my CC Libraries panel. Some of these you might want, some of these you might want to move them around, some of these you want to get rid of. Okay, so we're going to learn how we can work with all those. So let's just say, for example, my CC Libraries panel. I don't necessarily want that at this stage, so it's very easy to then get rid of it if you don't want to. So just very simply right-click on it, and I'm just going to choose Close, and that goes away. All right, now if you close something and you want to bring it back, we're going to learn how to bring it back. So don't worry if you close something and you want to have it return. It's very easy to bring it back, and we're going to talk all about that just in a few minutes. All right, now you will notice here I have something called the Pages panel, which is going to be one of the more common panels that you work with. But let's say I don't want my Pages panel over here with my Properties panel. I want it kind of floating someplace else to have a little bit more easy access. So very easily, Adobe allows us to be very, very flexible with what we want to work with. So if I just click and drag that out, you'll notice now this is just floating however I want it to. Okay, you'll also notice that I can bring this out just like this, and then now nothing is sitting inside of the side panel. But of course I can bring that back, and what I'm going to do now, if you'll notice, when I click and drag to the right, I'm going to get this little blue halo, and that returns. Same thing if I want my Pages panel back with my Properties panel, wait for that little blue halo. You'll notice that's going to return right with my Properties panel. But you'll also notice that if I come a little bit to the left, I get another blue halo. So what that's going to do, that's going to create another column for me, right? And we're going to learn a few of those in just a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and dock this back, and you can see that works very nicely. I can go ahead and drag this over so my Pages panel is first of all my tabs. So it's very intuitive and very forgiving. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right, now let's go ahead and add on some other panels. Now this is very important to remember this. Where do all of my panels live? Because this is by no means exhaustive. What I'm looking at right now, my Pages panel, my Properties panel. Earlier we saw my CC Libraries panel. There are so many more panels associated with InDesign. So if I go over to here to this Window tab, you see that right there, and I click on that, you're going to notice that there are a ton of panels available for me. Okay, and a lot of these panels are also going to have subpanels inside of them. One good example is the Styles panel. You see that? So Styles have lots and lots of other subsections to it. Let's go over here to Object and Layout, Align, Pathfinder, Transform, Type, and Tables. Look how many are inside of there. So just always kind of keep that in mind so you know kind of what we're working with here, that you will have other options kind of hiding in there. All right, so let's bring up some of the ones that we're definitely going to work with in this class. All right, so my Layers panel, absolutely. And you'll notice here conveniently it's in alphabetical order. I choose that. And now you'll notice that my side panel then becomes slightly different than it was before. Okay, so I might want to still configure that. So you'll notice here is now a right little column there. I want to move this over to the right, wait for my little blue halo. That gets now docked over here. Okay, now some panels will also come with other subpanels. Like when I brought up layers, I didn't actually ask for links, but it brought it up anyway, right? And we're going to work on links in just a little bit, but let me just go ahead and dock that over to the side as well. And now you'll notice how I have this little side panel with these two little icons there. Now, what are these icons? Well, these are my panels. So I can go ahead and open them up anytime I want to, access them, and also close them down. Let's go ahead and find some other ones. So I'll go back to my Window menu, and this time let's bring up, for example, the Align panel. I click on that, and now notice what this does. This just kind of floats out here. All right, so some panels will just kind of come and just to say, hey, listen, you know, I just want to be here for you whenever you want, or some panels will just kind of be docked on the right-hand side. So again, I have all the control in the world now to move it wherever I want. I can also close it this way by just simply clicking on the X if I want to. And like I said earlier, I have the option to right click on it. I can click close. But now notice within that right click menu, I have also the ability to close the tab group, because that's going to close both Align and Pathfinder. That's what came with the Align panel. and then I can minimize it. So if I minimize it, you'll notice that it just kind of like makes it smaller. So I have access to it when I want it, but then I can minimize it very easily so it just kind of doesn't take up so much room. Now you can also double click. See what I'm doing there? Double clicking also minimizes it. Sometimes you're double clicking more than once because sometimes there's extra parts of the panel that you'll need to do that. So it just kind of minimizes a little bit and then it minimizes all the way. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this Pathfinder panel just by simply right clicking on it. I don't need that for right now. And then I do want to have a line, but I want to have it over here in its own little space right there. And you see that's pretty nice. So now it doesn't take up as much room. However, it's maybe taking up a little bit more room than I would like. So you know what? Let me go ahead and just bring that over here. Okay, so we're looking good. Let's go ahead and add on a few more. Very important ones. Styles, they'll come down to there. I'm going to bring up my paragraph styles, which conveniently comes with my paragraph styles and character styles comes together. Okay, and then there's also these style packs. I don't need that for right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and right click on that. But I do want my character style and my paragraph style. So let me just go ahead and bring this over to here. I'm going to start getting a little bit more organized with this. Now we're going to go to the next level of how I can control my panels, because InDesign is great giving you all these choices, but it doesn't always put our panels where we want them to be. So I'm going to bring both my paragraph and my character styles down to the bottom so then they can be sort of stacked on top of each other. So watch what I'm going to do now. I'm going to click and drag all the way down to the bottom, wait for my little blue halo. Now they get stacked. And then I'm just going to join character styles with my paragraph styles. And now I've got a nice organized setting here. Okay, so very cool. Pages, properties, paragraph styles, and character styles. All right, and maybe let's just bring out one more. Let's see what other ones we might want to work with. So let's go to, for example, let's say text wrap. And see that floats right there. I don't need to have it all the time. So I'm just going to bring that right there. Very good. So I'm pretty happy with this. All right. Now, I want to be able to save this so I can get back to this beautiful workspace that I just created. Okay, because a lot of times you're going to get really kind of mad scientist about how you're going to be moving things around because you want to have access to your pages panel on the left or the right sometimes. But I consider this kind of like my happy place right now, because this is when things are nice and clean. I always want to come back to this place, even though things have gotten a little bit crazy. I know that this is where things were a little bit more sane, and I always want to come back to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over to here to my Essentials dropdown, and I'm going to say New Workspace. Essentially what this is saying is I'm going to be saving this current workspace, so therefore I have access to it, right, very easily. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on New Workspace. I'm just going to call this Dave's Faves. All right, and that's going to be the name of it. I'm going to say Capture, Panel Location, Menu Customization, everything like that. I click OK, and now you'll notice that instead of Essentials, it now says Dave's Faves. Okay, awesome. So that's great. So let me just show you here. If I mess things up, you know, things are crazy, you know, I'm having just like a wild day, too much coffee, all that stuff. Well, guess what? I want to come back to my little happy place. I like to think about this as kind of like the Mary Poppins effect, where there's a place for everything, everything in its place. She sings a song and everything goes right back into the box where they belong. So I click on the little drop down again, and I'm going to say Reset Dave's Faves. And see, everything goes back to exactly where it was just a few minutes ago. And you could be doing this, you know, months from now because you've saved that. All right? Now, one last thing I want to do, and this is going to come up for you a lot, is, well, let's say there's certain things that I want to add to my workspace. What do I do then? Because you're going to learn new tools. You're going to realize that there's going to be more value to certain panels. What do we do now? Well, let's bring up another very, very essential panel, and that is going to be my control panel right here. And you'll notice this now appears up on top. We'll be using this a lot. Okay, well, I'm glad I did that because this is a panel that I want to have access to all the time. And when I reset my workspace, I want to be able to see that control panel. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to Dave's Faves. And again, I'm going to say New Workspace. All right, and if you take a look over here in this little drop down where it says Untitled, there's Dave's Faves again, and I click on OK, and then it's going to say, hey, do you want to replace this because the name already exists? I'm going to say yes. So essentially it's like you're just saving over something. So I click OK, and now that new control panel is part of Dave's Faves from here on out. Okay, so lots and lots you can do. All right, so what I suggest is you get yours to look like mine as much as possible. And of course, as you start to get more familiar and your projects sort of dictate different types of panels you need to use, continue to build off of it. Okay, so here's a nice quick little introduction for you to customize. And then in the next lesson, we're going to go into just doing a workspace overview so we can get familiar with how to sort of nuance parts of our workspace, but also how to navigate all throughout the workspace. Okay, we'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we are going to discuss how to navigate the workspace. So within InDesign, there's a lot of information that is kind of subtle, but it's communicating to you a variety of different things that we need to know about, including, different tools, what they do, the different types of pages, right? How many links we have, how much we're zoomed in, all kinds of different things. So how can we navigate throughout all the things that InDesign offers us? Well, let's start off with some of the things that we talked about briefly in the last lesson, which means working with some of these little tooltips. So if I move my mouse over some of these, you can always teach yourself what these tools are. So if I go ahead and move my mouse over to here, you can see this is my selection tool. This is my type tool. This is my hand tool, etc. And you can see also in parentheses, again, those are the keyboard shortcuts. So again, we're going to be using a lot of these keyboard shortcuts, but I just want to remind you of that. Okay. Now you'll also notice that on the way bottom, I'm going to go ahead and draw a little box around here. There's a number of different really important elements to focus on there. So number one is my zoom level. So if I click on this little drop down, it drops up to tell me, okay, you know what, if you wanted to go to 100% to see what that's going to look like, you can very easily do that. If we want to go back to 50%, you can see what you can do there. All right. Now, that's going to be really important because sometimes you're going to have a number of different elements you want to click on, and you want to be able to zoom in because when you're so zoomed out, you can't necessarily select those. Sometimes you want to zoom out like we have here because I might want to see how the whole page looks as is, but I also might want to see what's going on the side here because maybe I have something in what's called the pasteboard that I want to have access to. So a lot of different reasons you might be doing that. In a few minutes, I'm going to talk about different shortcut keys we can use to be able to get different views using those keyboard shortcuts. All right, now to the right of this, you're going to see I also have the ability to go through all the different pages I have on here. So if I want to go to page 3, very easily, I can go to page 3. I can click on that. I can go back to page 1 very simply. Okay, so really nice. Now, just understand that there's overlap, that in terms of going to my page numbers, I could always go over here to my Pages panel, and you'll see that I have all of my pages here as well. Now, we're going to go into a lot more detail on our Pages panel as we go through the lesson, but let me just show you here if I want to get to page 3, I can just simply double-click right there in my Pages panel, and it takes me there. I can double-click back on page 1, and that takes me there just the same. And also note that I can go throughout my Pages panel and see all my pages this way. And I can also do it on the main screen here. You can see right there on my canvas, I can go through all of my different pages that way as well. Okay, so just understand that there's all kinds of different ways to accomplish a number of different tasks. Okay, so really important. Now, let's talk about another important element here. And you'll see here down below, it says that I have 53 errors. All right, this is what's known as my pre-flight. Okay, so if I were to double click on this right now, you're going to see that a new panel now appears called my pre-flight panel. Now, what does that mean? Well, pre-flight implies that, okay, are you ready to send this out to a printer? And if you have errors, you need to be aware of those errors so when you send it out to the printer, there's no surprises. All right, so I'm showing you this early on in this lesson because it's really important for you to know that This is a living organism constantly paying attention to any kind of errors you might have, any kind of just sort of things that are going to mess things up if you do print it. So we need to always be vigilant and aware of what kind of errors we have here. So you see here I have some links errors, which we're going to talk all about. But you see I have 53 missing links. And of course I want to resolve all those at some point. All right, I'm going to show you what that is. But essentially at this point it's important for us to know A, about the pre-flight, taking a look at the errors, but also note that links, all they mean is just basic images. Okay, so I have 53 images inside of this document that InDesign cannot find. So most likely you're going to be having that same problem when you inherit my files or potentially inherit other people's files, okay? But really the key takeaway here is let's keep an eye on this, because as we go throughout the program, as we go throughout our projects, you may have different types of errors as well. And we're going to talk all about those. I'm going to go ahead and close that. All right, very good. So those are really, really important things to understand then. All those things on the bottom, navigating throughout the program, and also understanding what kind of errors might be happening. All right. Now, let's talk about some important keyboard shortcuts. All right, so earlier I talked about the ability to zoom in and zoom out. Well, if I want to zoom in a little bit, I can just do Control or Command plus or Control or Command minus. You can see how well that works. Very nice. I'm just zooming right in on that picture or on that text. I can click on that very easily. And just note, by the way, I'm using my selection tool to select, and I can also come back. But now one of my favorite keyboard shortcuts for zooming in and out is Command or Control 0. So think about 0 as like getting back to ground zero, and that's essentially our perfect fit. So if I do Control 0 right now, you can see that's a perfect fit. So you can see that really works well. Now some of you may be using a mouse or a trackpad. You can also just zoom in using your trackpad just by doing a little pinch. Or if you're using a mouse with a wheel, you can hold down the Alt or Option key and then just scroll up and down just like that. All right, so lots and lots of options. And then again, here I am, and I'm going to use my Control 0, and now I'm back to a perfect fit. I love that. Okay, next really important keyboard shortcut. We're going to have one is based off of just one key, which is just the W key. And the other one is going to be a Shift W key. Well, let me talk about what that is. When you have the W key, all that does is just turn on and off all the different markings that are behind the scene here. So it could be like your margins, it could be text boxes, it could be guides, all kinds of different things. Currently I have it off. So it's essentially kind of like a print preview in a way, but I turn it back on and it gives me a little bit more information about where things are, you know, like why aren't things printing, or how is this thing aligned or not aligned. This gives me all kinds of information to be able to control what's happening on the page. All right, we're going to talk about a lot of these things as we go forward. But just note, if you don't like it, you just hit the W key. There's no Shift W, it's no Control W, just plain old W. I like to think about it as like with and without. With and without. Okay, really, really good one to know about. Another one is the Shift W key. All right, so if I do Shift plus W, you'll notice this brings up actually like a print preview. And if I just use my little arrow keys, I can then go throughout my document very nicely and easily, just going left, right, and when I'm done, I just hit the Escape key and it takes me right back. Okay, again, that is Shift W. All right, you'll be using that all the time, I can assure you of that. And then the last one to talk about, and I like to talk about this one because sometimes people stumble upon this one by accident, and that's the Tab key. When you hit the Tab key, notice what that does. It basically puts away all of your main panels without actually removing your ruler or anything like that, in case you just want to see, hey, what's this going to look like with all my panels, without my panels, right? So you can see what works best for you, okay? So it's kind of like the W, or it's kind of like the Shift W, but somewhere in between there. But most of the time I like to show people this because it happens that they hit the Tab key by accident and they don't know what happened. So just tap on the Tab key again and you bring it right back. It's like an on-off switch. Okay, so really, really important stuff there. Okay, so navigating the program, there's definitely a method to the madness, understanding some of these nuances, going up and down on pages, really, really important stuff, but sometimes a little subtle. So let's make sure we all understand that. Give yourself a few minutes to practice that, and we will see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to start from scratch, how to create a new document. And in InDesign, you can be creating a one-page document. Maybe it's a poster, maybe it's a newsletter, maybe it's a book, maybe it's a magazine, maybe it's a proposal. Anything you create, it's going to ultimately start off with the same process. So if we click over here in the File menu, you're going to see here I could do New, and then notice here is Document. We're not going to be doing a book or a library at this point, so we're just going to say Document, or just notice the keyboard shortcut of Control or Command N. And then when I do that, you will see it's going to take me to this little dialog box, a very, very feature-rich dialog box. So if we start up on top here, you're going to notice how there's a Recent tab, a Save tab, Print, Web, and Mobile. So they're giving us some nice presets if we want them. So if I click on Print, I want you to notice here that it comes up with a whole bunch of preset sizes, and also it's going to give it to us in what's called picas. We're not going to be working with picas, but that is a unit of measure for size. We're going to be working with either inches or pixels. Okay, but just notice that InDesign by default will actually give you picas as a measurement, so don't be thrown off by that. And I'm going to show you how you can change all that in a little bit. Now, if we want to do something for the web, sometimes you're using InDesign to do, let's say, a web page mock-up, something like that, and you need to know, all right, well, if I click on web, what's available for me in terms of different sizes, different dimensions. You'll notice that the unit of measure for web is pixels. Okay, so these are all nice and preset. And maybe you're doing a mock-up for an app, right? And you can see here for iPhone, for Android, for iPads, things like that. Now, in a little bit, we're going to come back to the Save tab, because sometimes you're going to be creating documents that you want to save the dimensions and the number of pages and the margins, so you'll always be able to get them to come back here right whenever you want them. Okay, so really, really nice. Now also here is Recent. Now let's go ahead and just start off just by creating something from scratch. And I'm going to go over here to the right hand side, and I'm going to change this from picas to inches. And you'll notice that that just converts automatically. And I'm going to keep it at 8.5 by 11. But just notice that I can actually change the orientation very quickly and easily by clicking on this. And now it's 11 by 8.5, and then back to that again. So just depending on what you're trying to do. I'm going to keep mine at a portrait orientation. Then very simply it asks me, well, how many pages do you want? Well, you know what? I'm going to do 5 pages. Okay, and you're going to start at page 1. That makes sense. Now, do you want to have facing pages? So if it's going to be a book, you might want them to be side by side. If it's going to be, let's say, like maybe a newsletter where you don't necessarily need to show it that way, you can turn this off and on. Right? We're going to talk about how we can change these things after the fact. So don't get too stuck on the fact, well, I need to make the right decision right now, because we can always change those things once we get back into the document. Okay, so I'm going to keep it at not facing for right now. And it's asking me, well, how many columns do you want? I don't want to have more than one column, so I'm going to keep it at that. All right, so I'm just going to say 1 column. But just notice that if I did have 2 columns, there is something called the gutter. So that's basically the space between the columns. All right, so what I'm going to do just to demonstrate this for you is I'm going to turn on the preview way down here. Do you see that there? And when I click on preview, you're going to see that behind me now becomes a preview of what I'm about to create. And let's take a look at what 2 columns will look like. You can see there it is. Let's see what 3 columns looks like. You can see there they are. And if I increase the gutter, notice that's just the space between all of the columns. All right, so it's really nice. It gives you a preview before you start. Now I'm going to bring that back down to 1 column, and then I want to adjust the margins. Now keep in mind that if you don't see your margin settings over here and your bleed and your slug, they might be minimized. So you might have to just click on this little arrow right next to these to then expand it out. All right, so just notice you can change the margins right here. I'm going to keep mine at 1/2 inch, but you'll also notice that over here on the right hand side is the ability to link together all of the different directions. So if I change one, they're all going to change. You can link it or unlink it. So if I link it right now and I make this a little bit lower, they all change. Okay, I increase it and you can see that they all change. If I turn it off, that they're not linked anymore, and I just want to make the left margin, see that, a little wider, only the left margin gets affected. I'm going to bring that back so we're all nice and happy at 1/2 inch. Okay, so the bleed and the slug. So your bleed, this is when you are, let's say for example, this image right here. See that? So this is a full bleed coming all the way to the edge. Okay, do you see that? You can see that's a full bleed coming all the way to the edge. All right, so many times if you're printing out, just something that you want to have, like the image be very powerful and sort of dominating on the screen, you'd want to do a full bleed. Now, keep in mind, 0 does not do what you think it's going to do. You want to actually go up a little bit more, because just in case the printer kind of cuts something off, you want to have a little bit of extra space right there, just kind of some insurance. So just that tiny, tiny little bit. Of course, you want to make sure that you're not losing any image information or anything like that. So, so you don't want to have any important information on that little sliver. But if you are going to be concerned about bleeds, I would make sure that you increase this to 0.125. Okay, I'm going to keep mine at that so you can see it there. All right, now we also have our slugs. So slugs is basically when you are doing a print job and you want to see some important information, like let's just say your color information, might be your phone number, might be your information about your fonts, or just the name of the file. That's going to be way, way, way on the outside. It does not get printed, but you might want to see that, and your printer might want to see that, so that's just going to be on the outside. When we finally do an export of all of our documents, you'll be able to see where those slug options are and how we can view them. All right, so just keep that in mind. All right, now finally, if I am ready now to save this, because I'm going to use this all the time, I would want to create a preset for this. So I'm going to click on this right up here. All right, I'm going to say, all right, this is going to be 5-page, and I'll just say newsletter, right, whatever, okay? And then notice all the settings there. I say save preset, and now notice it's inside of my save tab. It automatically just shows up there, okay? That's great. All right, and now I'm ready to create. And now you can see I have a 5-page document. Everything looks great. I can even scroll down this way, and you can see now I'm good to go. Okay, now just so we're clear about certain things in terms of making changes, if you wanted to make changes to some of those parameters, I'm going to introduce you to the Properties panel, because the Properties panel is going to just be a lifesaver for almost anything you work with. All right, and understand that the Properties panel is context sensitive. So depending on what you are looking at, depending on what's active, the Properties panel will show you the information on that. Okay, so just notice here is my properties. Okay, that's great, and you can see it's a letter document. I brought it in as picas, right? Like I said, it really sticks to the picas. We're going to change that in just a little bit. You're actually using the Properties panel, but you can see here's 5 pages. If I decide to make that 10 pages, I can very easily now change that. And just notice here, now I have 10 pages here. Okay, so you can make these changes inside the Properties panel. If I wanted to adjust the margins, I can do that as well. Notice they're still in picas. So let's go ahead and fix that so it's no longer in picas. Okay, so you can see here, if you look over here on the bottom, I have my rulers and guides. If for whatever reason you do not have your ruler activated, you can click on this right here. So notice I in fact do have a ruler, okay, just like that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that's active. In case that's not active for you, go ahead and turn that on. And very simply, right click on the ruler, and I'm going to change that to inches. Okay, and you'll notice here that I have to do it over here on the left hand side too. So you have to do it twice. However, if you right click in this part here in the little nexus right there, I'm going to go ahead and bring this back to, let's say, pixels. Notice how both of them change, both the X and the Y. So let me do that one more time. Right click in the upper corner, I'm going to say inches, and now everything changes. And not only does it change up here, but it also changes in my Properties panel. All right, so keeping that in mind, really important thing. And we're going to talk about how we can change all these things in our preferences as well later on in a few lessons. Okay, so earlier we also talked about, well, you know what? Let's say I want to change, this from facing pages to not facing pages and vice versa. I can do that from here. So let me just scroll down to like page 2 and 3. I'm going to choose facing pages, and you can see, there you have it. I now have facing pages. I changed my mind. I can turn that off very easily. All right, so just keep that in mind. Really, really helpful stuff to be able to do all kinds of different things very easily, even after you've made those parameters in the new document dialog box. You can make these changes within your properties as well. So just play around with these and you'll see it's very much a spice taste thing. You'll be able to figure it out. But this is a really good introduction to A, creating a document, but B, the properties panel, just as important. Okay? So practice all of that, create yourself a new document, and we will see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to do a nice little deep dive into the Pages panel. Many of your documents that you'll be working with are going to have multiple pages. So it's important to understand how to navigate pages, how to add on pages, and how to change some of the properties of our pages. So for the purposes of this exercise, I'm just going to go ahead and just tear this off right here. And I'm going to make this a little bit taller so we can see all of our pages here. So we can get a nice little tour of what our Pages panel allows for us. Now, let's just see here, first of all, again, how I can go directly to a page. So if I double click on one of these little thumbnails, it takes me right here. I double click back to here, and it takes me right back to this page here. So very simple, very straightforward. And of course, I can just scroll all the way down and double click onto one of those. And also, early we talked about the fact that we can go to this little drop down and go directly to a page that way. Okay, so really nice, hopefully very straightforward. Now, there's going to be times when you want to either add on pages, you want to move pages, you want to even delete pages. It's very easy to do that. So right-clicking really goes a long way in this program. So just keep that in mind. So let's just say, for example, I wanted to add on a new page right after page 5. So if I right-click, just notice how all these options come up here. Insert page, move page, duplicate page, delete pages, print the page. It goes on and on and on. But for our purposes, just know that some of these things should be familiar to you. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and just say insert page. And it asks me how many pages do I want. I'll just go ahead and just say 2 pages. Where do you want it? Do you want it after the page, before the page, maybe the start or end of the document? Totally up to you. I want mine to be 2 pages and then after the current page, which is page 5. And then we have something called the parent pages, and we're going to do a whole series of lessons on those as well. But for right now, just understand that we have 3 of these, okay? And we're only going to focus on just this one right now. But essentially, the parent page is kind of the mold that you're basing this page on. So there might be certain layouts, or there could be certain kind of page elements, like a page number, or a logo, something like that, and I want to have those repeating elements, just to kind of put a pin in that for right now. We're going to keep it so it's based off of this A master right there. All right, so I click OK, and now I've just added on 2 blank pages. Okay, really, really nice. And you'll notice here's my page number, and that's based off of, again, the parent page. So really nice. Now let's say I decide I want to delete that. Okay, so I want you to notice how these are both individual and independent of each other. So if I wanted to delete both of them, I would have to hold down the Shift key to be able to do that. So now if I right click, I'm going to go ahead and just say delete the spread. Do you see that? And then it just goes right away. Okay, so super easy to do. All right, now let's go into something else. Let's say I wanted to move some things around. Okay, so let's just go ahead and say I wanted to move both of these up a little bit more. Like this history is going to be before everything else. Okay, so again, I'm going to hold down the Shift key, select both of them, and now keep your eye on this little white line that appears here. It can go this way, right, that way, and in between, anything like that. But if I do it before this one, I'm moving the whole spread very easily before that. And now notice this has been bumped down, and then these are here. Okay, so really easy to do, right? And you can see very, very intuitive. If you like to right click, just note you do have the option to move the page, and then you can tell it where you want to move it with the same parameters as you did when you inserted the page, after, before, all that good stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and click cancel, and just note, very easy to do any of those ways. All right, so excellent. Now, I do want to talk about the Pages panel a little bit, just so you can see kind of what some of the elements are and how we can change some of the view settings. On top of my Pages panel, you're going to see that there is my parent page section. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag this down so we can see that I have these individual parent pages. Okay, and these are names that they were given prior to this, like A master, B master, C master. And recently, InDesign changed it from master page to parent page. So you might hear those terms interchangeably. All right, so but for the purposes of our class, we're going to call them parent pages. All right, so you can see this is where they live. And at some point, as you get more advanced, you're going to be spending a lot of time here. But just know that if you can't see them, you can always extend it out like this. All right, now let's come down to the bottom. And I want you to notice how there are some nice little commands like deleting a page. If you select a page, you can go ahead and delete it that way. Really nice and easy. If you wanted to create a new page, you can just do it right from here. So again, super easy to do. Just know where these icons are, what they look like. Okay, fantastic. Now let's take a look at some other kind of really helpful options that are going to be a little bit hidden, but it's also going to help you kind of understand the culture of InDesign. So if we take a look at this little guy right there, okay, some people call this the hamburger. Okay, this is officially known as the panel menu. If you click on that, you'll notice that a lot of the options that we saw when we right-clicked are also going to be here, right? Insert pages, move pages, etc. But what I want to get us to is this one down here, which is the panel options. So when I click on that, this is going to take me to a bunch of different options for a bunch of different elements within the Pages panel. Pages, parents, icons, panel layout, right? So what kind of things do you want to change for this panel? So like the size, for example, if you really want to have like big thumbnails, you can very, very easily do that. The parents, right? Small is good, or maybe even extra small. Do they need to take up that much space? Great, we can do that. So let me click OK so you can see what that looks like. And you can see maybe this is a better way for you to interface, right? Because, oh yeah, that's what that page is. Great, I've got this nice little shot of Portugal. Great, and there's that cobblestone. I remember that now. Great. So you don't have to kind of squint or go right to that page. You can very easily do that. You can see the parent pages have shrunk down just the same. Okay, so I'm going to come back to my little panel menu, go over here to panel options, and I'm going to make this back to medium. Okay, very good. Now, in terms of our icons, do you want to have certain icons down below, right? It's really up to you. Turn it on, turn it off. And do you want to have your panel layout with your parents on top or your parents on the bottom? Totally up to you. I'm going to keep it just as is, but notice it's very much a spice to taste. Turn these things on or not. Okay, so I'm going to bring this back here. All right, so now I'm back to where we started from. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about how the Pages panel and the Properties panel works in sync with each other. Earlier we talked about the Properties panel. We're going to talk about it again in just a different context. So let me go ahead and just drag this over here so they're all right next to each other. And I want you to notice the Property panel says no selection. But let's just see what happens when I choose this right there. Okay, and you will notice now it gives me all kinds of information about the document. Do you see that right there? That's great. But now when I choose a page, it's going to be something a little bit different, because I'm going to go in and just make sure I'm on page 1. And it tells me here I'm currently on page 1. So you have to double click on it to activate it. And that is going to be, again, the context of this particular page, giving me the option to edit this page's parameters. Okay, so when I make the edit, it's only going to be on this page. Okay, it's not going to do the whole document. Okay, this is the document settings, this is the page settings. Very subtle, so just really understand that. Now, I'm going to edit page 1. I click on that, and this is going to take me to kind of a subset of the properties panel that only has to do with this particular page. All right, and then notice if I wanted to, I can make all kinds of different changes just to this page. So as an example, let's say I wanted to make this page landscape. I click on that. Notice how this only becomes landscape, right? This is the only page that is now landscape. These are still portrait. I can very easily bring that back. Okay, I can adjust the margins and columns just for that page if I want to as well. So really powerful, because there's a lot of other programs, right, that it actually is quite a bit harder to make those little changes on one individual page. Using the properties panel will allow you to do that. So I'm going to keep it as is. I'm going to click on the back button, and that takes me right back to my properties panel for everything right in there. Okay, so really nice, super helpful. And just again, some kind of nuance around that. So just really understand that. So I'm going to go to this one. Notice I'm on page 7, edit page. I'll go to here, page 9, and then notice there I am, edit page for that one. So just really keeping that in mind, that each of these individual items I select on is all context-based. And we'll talk more about that when we get into images and text boxes and everything, but the properties panel is going to be your friend in that case. Okay, so that's the end of this lesson for the Pages panel. So practice that, get familiar with it, get comfortable with it, and just be bold, be confident. All right, we'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks, everybody. In this lesson, we are going to give you an introduction on how to bring in images into your InDesign file. InDesign and other Adobe programs call that placing an image. So when you're importing an image from the outside, you are placing the image. So you can see here, this document has an image. This page also has an image. This page has an image. They've all been placed someplace from my computer. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the blank document we created in an earlier exercise, and we're just going to place it in. So you'll notice here, I go over here to File, and I'm going to say Place about halfway down. You'll also notice the keyboard shortcut of Control or Command D. So when I do that, it's going to take me into my computer, and you'll notice I have all these image files, and you have access to these as well. I have images that are going to take us to Italy. I have images that will take us to Portugal. So let's go ahead and go into Italy. Now, before I choose any of these images, I just want you to notice a few of these items down below. Okay, you can see here, I'm just going to actually focus just on these two. Show import options, which is unchecked, and also replace selected items. So if I say show import options, if you're working with, for example, let's say a Photoshop file that you want to bring in, it's going to give you additional options, like maybe you want to bring in only one of the layers that are inside of that Photoshop document, or you want to compress those layers or flatten the layers. So it's going to give you extra options. If you're just working with a JPEG or a PNG or a TIFF or something like that, typically you're going to have this unchecked. So for the most part, we're going to keep it unchecked. Now this is kind of an important one here, this replace selected items. We're going to do that in just a little bit. But the key takeaway here is that we don't want to have anything selected at the time of when we're placing it unless we are planning on replacing it. Okay, so just keep that in mind. If anything kind of goes a little sideways, it's like, oh, wait a second, was something selected when I decided to place this image? Okay, so pretty straightforward. Hopefully you get that. All right, so let's bring in this cute little door here. So I'm going to double click on that. And now you'll notice that InDesign gives me this little sort of like backpack, right? I like to call it, with my arrow. You can see there, I can now place this anywhere I want. So I'm going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to just simply click once, and you're going to see it brings in the original size of the image, right? Just like that, it just brings it in, puts it right where I clicked, but I have no control over the size and really kind of the placement to a certain degree. So I'm going to undo, and I can go over here to Edit and then Undo, and you'll notice it takes me right back to that little backpack with my arrow there. But this time, I would like to place it down here and have a little more control over the placement and also the size of it. So all I'm going to do now is just simply click and drag to the size and the placement I want, and I let go, and you can see, there you have it. There's my image. And now I can then move it wherever I want. Now keep in mind that when you're working with images in terms of moving them around, you want to make sure that you are using the correct tool, okay, which is going to be this tool right there. So if I move my mouse over it, you will see it's the selection tool. So if you're not in the selection tool, or if you ended up in another tool somehow, just make sure that you select the selection tool, which looks like this little black arrow, and then you can move it around anywhere you want to. Okay, now I'm going to give you just a quick little tip when you're resizing. Okay, and we're going to talk all about images and all kinds of different details with images because there's some nuance to it. But one thing that really kind of like throws people off a little bit when they're working with InDesign in the beginning is resizing. And all I'm going to do now is just do what I would normally do, just simply click and drag, and I just want you to see what's going to happen. When I click and drag from the corners, what it does is it resizes the frame. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and undo, edit, undo. And I just want you to note that images have two elements to them. They have a frame and the image itself that lives inside of the frame. Okay, so just keep that in mind. We're going to talk more about that. Okay, but just one thing I just want you to know is that when you try to resize and you try to resize it, you're just going to be resizing the frame. Okay, so there's two ways we can address this. One way is just by simply choosing auto fit right from up here. Okay, just go ahead and check that. You'll also notice that there should be an auto fit somewhere inside of your properties panel. You can see there that is right there. And then if you like keyboard shortcuts, you can always do Control or Command and Shift and click and drag, right? And that's my preferred way to do it because you can just sort of do it like as a one-off if you want to, but not always have it be that. All right, but we're going to talk more about that in more detail when we get into working with our images, part 1 and part 2. All right, but now let me just go ahead and show you something else you might want to do. When you are placing images, you might want to replace an old image. Okay, so I like how this is positioned. I want to have it more or less this size if it's going to fit dimension wise. So all I'm going to do now is, I don't know, I actually really like this image. Let's go ahead and try this one. Maybe there's going to be a better one for history for this. So notice this is selected. So now I'm going to go here to File. I'm going to say Place. And I just again want you to notice that Replace Selected Items is in fact chosen. So let's go ahead and go back to Portugal and let's find a nice one that says something about history potentially. All right, there's a nice one. And you're going to see there's a little castle. So I'm just going to simply double click this time and you're going to see how it replaces it. Okay, so that's just a really nice thing to know because you don't have to do it all over again. Okay, so really, really good stuff. Okay, last thing I want to talk about, when you place images, all of your images are kept in a library called the Links panel. Okay, so I'm going to bring that up. Earlier we talked about that in an earlier lesson. So you can see there that is. If you don't see it there, you can always go to Window and then Links, and it should be there. And you can see there is my image, and it tells me what page that is on. You may see some question marks there, and that was those errors we talked about earlier, that it can't find those links. It needs to know where it is. This one, it knows exactly where it is, and it knows exactly where it came from on my computer. Right? We're going to talk all about that later on, but I just at this point don't want you to get too alarmed when you see some weird stuff like this. Okay, so that's placing in images. That is moving our images around, resizing them, and also replacing our images. All right, so practice that, and we'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to do a quick introduction into text and text boxes. In subsequent lessons, we are going to discuss type and typography and layout and all kinds of other formatting options. And then in subsequent lessons after that, we're going to get into styles, paragraph styles and character styles. So this is just going to be a very basic introduction on how to create text boxes, manipulate them a little bit, move them around, and some of our basic elements. So if we take a look at something that already exists, we'll go to our Portugal document. You'll notice here I have, let's just go to here to this one text box. I click on it and you'll notice here I get this little bounding box. And you will see how this is just one container that holds my text. So in InDesign, when you are creating a text box or you're bringing in any text at all, it needs to be in a text box container. It's not like other programs like Microsoft Word where there's a cursor just waiting there for you. So if I were to go, for example, to this blank document that we started, you'll notice how there's no text box or anything like that, I would have to draw out a text box. So let's just see how we do that. So very simple, you can see there's this little T right here. And if I were to click on it, you'll notice now I have a little text box icon that my cursor changes into. So if I just want to make a text box, it's going to be, let's just say, a title going across, you can see I click and drag, I let go, and you will now see that I have a little blinking cursor in there. And that blinking cursor is typically going to the size of the font that you have set it up to be. Now keep in mind that many times if you worked with a font, let's say like 100 points, it may remember that. So one kind of weird thing is that when you start to type something out, it may not show up inside there. Okay, so I can type this out right here. I'll just say Fabio's flowers. Okay, and then bam, there you go, right? And if I wanted to make that a little bit bigger, just simply highlight it. Now I just highlight it just by simply clicking and dragging, but notice if I double click, I get one word. If I triple click, I get the whole line. Okay, and later on we'll talk about how we can select entire paragraphs or even entire pages. All right, so nice little tricks with single click, double click, quadruple click, triple click, all that good stuff. Now, you will see here how I can increase my font size here. You'll also notice in my properties panel, I have a lot of my same font options. Okay, there's my font type, there is my font size once again, and if you scroll down, you're going to see like paragraph settings, bullets and numbering, and a lot of that stuff does repeat up here. So we're just going to give you just a basic introduction about some of the things that you can find here, and then also here, but then it's also going to set us up for when we do our whole lesson on typography. All right, now this section up here, as we said, overlaps with what's in the properties panel with our font and our font size, etc. But you'll notice how it's kind of separated out with two icons here. So I have my character formatting controls and I have my paragraph formatting controls. And that gives me things like alignment and for my margins and indenting and things like that. Okay, I'll come back to this. And you'll also notice that if I come back to my properties panel, a lot of that stuff overlaps. And you will see in our properties panel, we do have these little ellipses that shows us, guess what? Extra options. Okay, so if I scroll back down again, I'll click on the ellipses again, and it collapses. Okay, so just keep that in mind. That's kind of a space-saving tool that InDesign likes to have there, but it could trick you in case you don't know about it. All right, so just keep that in mind. That's just kind of one of those cultural things. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just click on this little drop down, and I'm going to bring this up to, let's just say 48. That gets nice and big, and then I'm going to choose another font here, and you can see I've got all the fonts that are on my computer. You may not have every single one of these, so you'll just need to make sure that yours, are similar. Okay, so in terms of like what you have available for you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and bring that up. And that's going to fit that right inside the text box. And just one thing I'm going to do on purpose is I'm going to make it too big for the text box and just notice what happens here. You will see that I now have this little guy right there that's telling me it's too big for the text box. And again, we're going to talk more about that in just a little bit. So notice that I'm no longer inside of the text anymore. Okay, and my goal is to make the text smaller because I have this little red dot there to telling me that like, uh-oh, wait a second, your text is too big for the text box. So I need to activate the text tool once again. Well, a nice little trick, so you don't have to go back to the T again, is to simply double click back on the text box and guess what tool I'm back in automatically. And then I can then just bring that down. All right, and I may have to bring this down to be all the same size once again. So I'll bring this to 90. And now, maybe I'm going to do a little bit less than that. Let's go smaller, smaller, smaller. Very good. And then let's go ahead and center that. And I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, and then just like I worked with my images, I can resize my frame. I can move it down, move it anywhere I want to here. Okay, so just some nice little basics of how we can work with text boxes. So just get comfortable with that before we get into some of the more sort of advanced, more sophisticated tools of working with our typography, working with text boxes to a certain degree, bringing in columns and things like that. But just a nice little primer before we get started with some of those other more sophisticated lessons. Okay, practice that and we'll see you soon. In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to draw out shapes. So shapes like rectangles and circles and squares and stars and triangles and things like that. Now you might wonder, well, why do I want to draw out shapes? Well, every document that you see has shapes on it. Could be shapes just for illustration purposes, but it could also be for, let's just say, a text box, and you can see there's a little backdrop. And you'll notice how that makes that stand out. Maybe you just want to do it just for the contrast, right? So for ease of viewing, right? Nice and easy on the eyes. For hierarchy, for things like that, right? And of course you can add color onto your shapes, so that also makes it pop. So let's just take a look at some examples where I have this nice little blue shape behind my title. It really makes it stand out. Here's a nice little line there that makes it stand out. Here's a nice creative way of using a shape. It's a little bit sort of like asymmetrical, but it makes this stand out. Here's some more lines right there, different kinds of shapes, another line right there. Okay, and you can see very similar. And then you have a bunch of icons and stuff, which are not shapes, but you can see monochromatically, it does sort of break things up. And you can see lines right there, and then other shapes just like that. All right, so they're really everywhere, and they're really designed to make it so it's just easier for the viewer to go through your document and be able to kind of delineate and sort of demarcate where things are on the page. So it kind of breaks things up a little bit. So it doesn't look like a big essay. You have things sort of, segmented out and compartmentalized. All right, so let's just go ahead and see how we can draw out a shape. We're gonna go back over here to Fabio's Flowers. And I'm going to make sure I have nothing selected at this point, because if I do, then I might run into some problems. So just make sure that before you select anything or start any other type of task, you have nothing selected. And I can tell if this was selected, I'd have the bounding box there. So click on this sort of neutral area. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to here to this little rectangle. You should see that there. Now, I don't want you to be confused between this and this. This is my frame tool, which is going to be for working with images. Earlier we talked about how our images have both the frame and also the image content inside there, which we're going to talk about at a future lesson. These are just for illustration purposes. Now if I right click on this, you're going to see I have the ability to draw out a rectangle, an ellipse, which is basically just like a circle, or a polygon, which could be like a hexagon, it could be an octagon, it could even be a triangle or a star. All right, so before I draw it out at all, after I select it, I need to decide what color is going to be my fill color and also what color is going to be my stroke color. So you'll notice these two choices down here. All right, so our fill color is basically just going to be the color that's going to be inside the shape, and the stroke color is the outline of it or the border of it. Okay, so notice how there's these little slashes here. This is telling me that if I were to draw out a shape right now, there would be no color on either the inside, the fill, or the outside, which is the stroke. So how do I actually add a color onto it? No problem, just double click on it. This little color picker is going to show up here, and I can then just choose any color from here. We're going to get into more detail on color in a little bit, but let's just go ahead and just choose any one we like. Okay, just by clicking and dragging. You'll also notice if you don't see kind of the hue and sort of shading that you like, you can go ahead and move this up and down and do whatever you like. All right, so I'll just drag this down here, and you'll notice that the color that I have now chosen shows up here. Okay, that is going to be the color that I'm ultimately going to end up with. All right, and again, we're going to talk more detail on colors in a little bit, but some of you may know the colors that you want, like your RGB value, your CMYK. We're going to talk all about that in a little bit, but for right now, we're just going to choose a nice simple color. I click OK, and you'll notice that it gives me confirmation of the color here, and it also does it up here in my control panel, which is pretty great. Now, very simply, I'm just going to just draw a very simple rectangle to go along the side to kind of add a little bit of a kind of a border to this. All right, just kind of a little framing. So very simply, I click and drag, and notice I'm starting off of the page. Okay, because I want there to be a little bit of a bleed. So when it is printed, I make sure I don't lose anything. All right, so I'm going to click away. I'm going to hit the W key so you can really see what that's going to look like. All right, and we're off to a little nice start. And you'll see that the W key does remove that little extra bleed so you can see what it's actually going to look like. All right, so pretty simple. But let's talk about how we can just draw out some other basic shapes that we may not use, but I want you to at least get the tools down. So I want to draw out, let's just say, a perfect square in this case. So what I'm going to do again is go over to my rectangle tool, and then I'm going to choose any color, it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key at this point. As I click and drag, I have a perfect square. Great, click away. All right, I'm going to go over to here, right click, and I'm going to do a perfect circle. And this time I'm going to choose a different color, and I'm going to choose a stroke color for this. So I double click on that, and let's do something kind of bright. All right, and then you'll notice there it is. There's that color there. And you'll notice that there's a number 1 right there, and that's telling me how thick my stroke is going to be. All right, so let's go ahead and make that nice and thick. All right, let's bring that up to 20. I'm now going to make a perfect circle, again holding down the Shift key, and you can see, very nice. I click away, and then I'm going to hit the W key so you can really see what that's going to look like. All right, so these can be really, really nice. Now I'm going to go ahead and just make it so I don't have this stroke anymore, and I can very easily do that in one of 2 ways. All right, I can come over to here and then just simply click on this little slash and notice how that goes away. But I could also just bring that back down to 0 if I wanted to. All right, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, holding down the Shift key. That constrains my proportions. Great, get these nice aligned, and you're good to go. All right, next thing I want to do is draw out a polygon. So I'm going to come back over to here. I'm going to choose the polygon tool. Now, polygons can be so many different things, right? A polygon can be a hexagon, an octagon. It could also be a triangle. It could be a star. It could be so many things. So what I'm going to do now is just click anywhere inside here, right? Just notice that I just clicked, and automatically the polygon dialog box pops up, and it's asking me, let's come down to here, the number of sides I want, and also if it's going to be a star, what is the star inset? Those are going to be the things you're really most concerned with. So let's just draw like just a basic stop sign, okay, which we know is 8 sides. I click OK, all right, and it remembered the last thing I did with all these, right? But it's a very easy fix. I don't want to have a stroke around it. I'm going to then go back to my regular selection tool and just simply click and drag, holding down my Shift key to constrain the proportions, and now I have a shape that is a polygon. Okay, very good, right? I like it. Now let's go ahead and try out a regular triangle. All right, now before I do that, I'm going to just make it so it does not have a stroke around it. So I come back over to here, right, and I'm going to just do maybe a different color. Now I'm all set up with no stroke, and I have a fill. And I come back over to here, and again, I'm going to click very simply, and this time I'm going to say 3 sides. And if you know the size of your polygon, in this case, if you know the size of your triangle, you can put it in right here. But I find it a lot easier just to have it just be drawn, and then I resize it however I want to. Okay, so I'm planning to make like a pyramid. I want to just sort of eyeball it a little bit. I can do it after the fact. So everything is very, very flexible, very, very easy. Okay, now if you want to be a little more creative about some of these things, you can even kind of make them go like a little bit off the page a little bit. You can even rotate them, that kind of thing, and maybe even kind of come a little bit like that. So then you have kind of just a different look and feel of what you're trying to do. Okay, so I can just go ahead and just like I said, rotate, come to the edge just like that, and then maybe you're going to do something like this, and then it just sort of stands out in a little bit of a different way. Okay, and all these things can be doing the same thing, right? So let's just go ahead and do that. Let's make this a little bit bigger. So now we're just adding a little bit more sort of visual interest. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of these for right now because I'm going to make a little bit more room for working with a star. How do I select all of these? Is very simply I'm going to marquee over all of these just like that. And then I'm just going to hit the delete key on my keyboard, and then those are gone. Last thing we're going to do here with drawing out shapes is working with a star. So again, I'm going to choose my polygon tool, and then this time I'm going to double click on that, and let's just choose a nice little yellow color for a star. And this time, when I click on there, I'm going to actually tell it I want, let's just say, a 10 pointed star. And then from here, for my inset, I'm going to say 30%. Well, let's just see what that even looks like. I click OK, and then you'll notice what that's done. Okay, it's 30% of the way in from the outside points. So I go back to my selection tool, and I'm going to click and drag just like that. That looks really neat. Okay, let's try one more. Come back over to here. I'm going to simply click, and this time I'm just going to do a very simple 5-pointed star, and I'm going to say 50%. And that's going to look like your standard star that we're all used to. Click on that, and then I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. And again, if you want to rotate it, come to the edge, just like that, wait for that little button hook there, and then you can have some fun with these kind of going in a variety of different directions. All right, and all these can serve as, frames for your text, can serve as, maybe you put an image inside of these. They're just adding a little bit of more contrast and a little more visual interest for your content. All right, so these are the basics of how we can draw out some shapes. In a little bit, we're going to be doing a nice little exercise on different ways we can work with shapes and images and bring them all together to create a nice little poster. All right, so practice all that, working with our colors, working with strokes, working with fills, picking out our colors, and then also working with a variety of different shape options we have within InDesign. Okay, and we'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to get a little bit deeper into working with images in InDesign. Now, when you bring in images, just a little reminder, InDesign brings them in with two different properties within the image. One property is going to be the frame that goes around the image. So think about a frame like we would in real life, where you have a frame around a picture, and then you have the image that's actually in the frame. Now the frame can have a multiple variety of different uses. It frames it, but it can also crop things around, but it also acts as a container. So if I simply just click on it here, you will notice here I have my frame around it. You can see this little blue frame. The blue frame around this is actually showing us the inset for a text wrap. So this is actually giving us a little bit of space there. And we're going to talk about that in future lessons. But what's nice about this, very simply, is I can go ahead and click and drag this, and then notice the entire thing moves, both the frame and the image. Okay? Now, what do I mean by the image? I know that sounds really odd, but let me just show you what I mean. If I go ahead and just click in the center, and by the way, most of you should actually have a little donut kind of circle in here. My screen recording software does not show that when I'm recording, but most of you should actually have a little donut in there. If you don't have that, you can always go to View, and you go to Extras, and you're going to see it's called the Content Grabber. Okay, but I'm going to show it to you as if it's there. You can see a little hand pops up, and when I click on that, that's what it's referring to as content. It's the image that lives inside of the frame. So you'll notice that my image is a different color in terms of what bounding box I show. So let me do that again. I click anywhere but that center part. I get this blue frame. I come in the center and I get the image. Now, when is that going to be beneficial for me? Well, I may want to move my image inside of the frame. So I'm just going to go ahead and just simply click and drag, and you'll notice there's my image, and I want to get a little more of the grapes. Great, and you can see I can do that. Right? But let's say I want to see less of like this bottom part down there. I would then manipulate the frame. So I click on that, and then all I'm going to do is essentially mask this out. So the frame is going to be a little bit smaller, and you can see I've just cropped that out. Okay, so all I'm doing is just resizing the frame. So again, think about it how you would like a frame inside of your house. All right, so very simply moving our images around, and then also selecting the image within the frame to then just move the image right there. Okay, so pretty simple, hopefully pretty straightforward. All right, now earlier we talked about ways that we can resize our images. So a quick review on that. I can use the auto fit option that's right up here, and then when I click and drag from the corner, it constrains the proportions, and what does it do? It also changes both the frame and the image at the same time. If that's not selected, it'll only just do the frame. Okay. The other way you can do it is with Control and Shift on my keyboard. You can see that. I can do that same thing. I'll just go ahead and do it the opposite way. Very good. Super happy. Okay. Now let's talk about how we can bring images in. So I'm going to bring it in to our Fabio's Flavors here. I'll actually go to my blank one here, my Fabio's Flavors, my poster we started. And I changed this from Fabio's Flowers to Fabio's Flavors because in a little bit we're going to make a poster about how we can actually work with some food pictures. All right, so how do we bring them in? We just simply go from here to File and then Place, and then we can bring them in. Now, I don't want to review this because I want to show you something a little bit different, because this time I'm going to show you how you can bring in an image inside of a frame that already exists. Okay, because sometimes you just want to have a little layout of how you want all your images to be presented. So now we're going to be introduced to something a little bit different called our frames. So if you right click on that, you're going to see we have our rectangle frame, an ellipse frame, and also our polygon frames. Very similar to what we did with our shapes, but this time they're going to be frames. All right, so I'm just going to do a very simple square. So I'm holding down the Shift key, and I'm going to turn everything back on by hitting the W key so you can see what a frame looks like. It's going to have a little X in there. All right, now I want to have an image live inside of that frame. So very simply, all I'm going to do is go over here to File, and I'm going to say Place, and then when I place an image in there, it's going to go inside of the frame. So I've already decided that I want to have a square image. I've already decided where it's going to go. So this helps me do my planning. All right, so let's just go ahead and bring in like this, maybe picture of the food. And I do that, and it's just going to pop right inside there. Okay, now the benefit of this is that I know it's going to be a square. And then because I'm working with an image and a frame separately, I can then go ahead and select this in there. And I'm just going to nudge this over and then have that nice and centered just like that. Okay, and by the way, you can use your keyboard, little nudge right there using my arrow keys to go left and right if you like as well. And that looks pretty good. Now, also note that just like a shape, I can put a stroke around this if I want to as well. Okay, so I'm going to come back over to here and I'm just going to increase the points for that, and I'm going to change that stroke color to a different stroke color right there. And I'm just going to go ahead and say OK. I click away. And now if I hit the W key again, I'm going to turn that off. And now very good. I have an image with a stroke around it. Okay, because I've established that frame, I'm already set to go with that. Okay, so really nice to be able to kind of create ahead of time how you want your layout to be. Let's just do that one more time, but let's do it with a circle frame this time. So I'm going to say ellipse frame tool, and I'm just going to hold down the Shift key. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and deselect it and then just turn everything on with the W key. And you can see this is a frame, right? Making the distinction between a frame and a regular shape. Very important to understand that. So I'm going to go back to File. I'm going to say Place. And let's bring in another image of maybe some food if I can find it. Let's go back to Italy. And there should be some nice delicious items in there. All right, let's bring in another picture of some pasta, and you can see how that fits in so nicely. Okay, now this may not always be the case, so I want to talk about something a little bit different when your items do not fit perfectly inside of your frame, but you still want to establish a way to make them fit. Okay, so let's discuss that, because when we're bringing in images, we may already have a preset layout, but our dimensions of our images may not fit perfectly. All right, so let's just go ahead and I'm just going to draw out another frame, and I'm just going to say, okay, here's my rectangle frame tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and just bring this out like that, for example. All right, and there you have it. And I'm going to bring in an image, so I'm going to say File, and then Place, and let's just find another picture. And let's just have a nice little picture of there, okay? And now this is looking okay, but it's not exactly what I want it to be. So I want to introduce you to our fitting options. All right, so you can get your fitting options in a variety of different ways. Number one is going to be inside of the Properties panel, and you're going to see that there's this whole group here called Frame Fitting. And you can move your mouse over them. It'll tell you exactly what it does. Fit content proportionally, fit content to frame, fit frame to content. So essentially, what is the winner? Is the winner going to be the content? That's going to be the determinant of what you want your content to look like. Or is the frame the right thing and we want everything to conform to what the frame looks like? Okay. The other way you can do it is by simply right-clicking, and then if you go to fitting, notice it's a little bit more spelled out. And of course you have a bunch of keyboard shortcuts as well. This is entirely up to you. I actually prefer this way because it's already showing me what the tools are. It's already spelled out. So let's just see what these do. So I'm going to just tinker with these right here. I have my fit frame to content, fit content to frame, and also content aware fit. Okay, so we'll play around with some of these. So let's just try fit the frame to the content. So in this case, the content is sort of the winner of the tug of war. I choose that, and then notice how the frame then conformed to what the image's original dimensions are. So let me go ahead and undo that. Let's do that one more time. And this time I'm going to say fit the content to the frame. All right, and you can see now, it now just kind of shrunk it, so it fit the image perfectly inside there. Okay, but you may find sometimes that the image gets a little bit kind of distorted. So we have to be aware of that. Now, we don't necessarily always have to be aware of it because there is this content aware fit that InDesign is going to use its sort of artificial intelligence to identify what's going to be a good fit within the frame for the image without contorting it, okay, but also giving you as much of the image as possible. Let's go ahead and choose that. And you can see, great, nice job. And of course, I can come over to here and I can nudge this up a tiny bit. And that's ideal. So when you're bringing in an image, you just want to make sure you're aware of what the distortion looks like, what the dimensions look like, and in case it doesn't fit into the frame, no problem. Your fitting options are going to really help save you. Okay? So go ahead and practice that. We're going to come back. We're going to do a little bit more on images, and we're also going to talk about working with our links panel briefly so we understand what things are and where things are. Okay, pause the video, practice, and we'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to go a little bit deeper into our image discussion so we have an opportunity to be a little bit more creative and have more opportunities to kind of nuance our images a little bit more. So I'm looking at this image that I brought in, and I brought it into this perfect square frame. But my client comes over and says, you know what, this might look nicer in a round circle frame. Well, I know how to do that from scratch, but I don't want to have to do that all over again because I like the placement of it, and I'm just going to waste some time if I have to do that all over again. Well, the good news is that InDesign has a really nice function to be able to convert your frame into a different shape. And by the way, if you're working with shapes, it's the same process. So let's go ahead and convert this into a circle. Well, how do I do that? Two ways I can. So I'm going to simply choose my image, and then I'm going to go way up here to my object menu. Okay, so I click on that, and then way down on the bottom is this convert shape. And I can convert that shape, which is now a square, into any one of these shapes here. Okay, so very simply, I'm just going to choose ellipse, and you'll see, just like that, it is now a perfect circle. All right, and that actually looks pretty neat. I like that. And of course, like I said in the last lesson, I can put a stroke around this. I can move it around however I want to. We're going to learn about text wrapping, but you see how nice and easy that is. Let me go ahead and undo that. I'm going to show you the other way you can do this that you might prefer. So again, I select the image. This time I'm going to come over here to my properties panel, and I'm going to click and drag down on the scroll bar, and I want you to notice there's this quick actions section, and there's a lot of things that you may prefer to use at some point, but what we're going to choose is convert shape, and guess what? The same choices appear here. So we don't have to remember as much, because maybe going to that object menu might be like, oh my, where do I go again? There's so many menu options there. If I go to properties, you'll see I have all these choices right here. And now let's go ahead and just try a different one. Let's go over here to rounded rectangle. And you can see very subtly, I'll go ahead and zoom in on that for you. You can see now I have this little rounded rectangle around that. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But I want you to really understand how easy it is to convert the shape. Okay, so let's go ahead and just maybe take a look at another image. And I'm going to do maybe something similar to this one, and working with what's called my corner radiuses, right, or corner radii, and that's what our rounded corners are, because that could actually add on a little bit of kind of visual interest for people. Let me just go ahead and just clean up my frames before I do that, so nice and airtight. So what do I wanting to do? I want to actually make a rounded corner along the outside there. Well, how do I do it in a slightly different way than converting the shape? Well, I want you to notice inside of my properties panel, I have this section right there called corner. And then notice my corner is this hard 90-degree corner. Well, guess what? Very simply, I can choose all kinds of different corners to add on some more visual interest around my image. So let's just choose a really simple one. Let's go to rounded. And you can see very subtly I have a rounded corner, but maybe it's too subtle. So let's bump that up. Come over to here. All right, just wait for it, and there it is, and that looks pretty neat. Maybe that's the style you're looking for. Let's try a different one. Come back over to here, and let's try fancy. See what that does. Maybe that's the look you're looking for. And again, if you're working with a shape, it's going to be the same process. Let's try bevel. That might actually work nicely for what we're trying to communicate, something about Europe. Maybe that's in line with your aesthetic. Try inset, and you'll notice that the same thing applies if I want to change the parameters of that. So maybe I don't want too much of an inset. I can then play around with it that way. Okay, so really, really nice. But let's just go ahead and go back to my rounded. And this time what I'm going to do is I want you to play around with this guy right there. Click to edit the corners. So when I choose that, I want you to notice how this is actually going to give me a little bit more flexibility and possibly a little bit more sort of tactile control over how I'm going to manipulate this. So now I get these 4 diamonds. I'm going to click and drag just like that, and then maybe I want to make it kind of like a pillbox shape, something like that, and I can do that. All right, so it's a little more of a kind of a capsule, if you will. Let's go ahead and bring this back, and notice how all 4 of them get manipulated. But let's say I wanted to only manipulate 1 or 2 of them. I want to isolate the corners. So let's make sure this is selected. And I'm going to make sure again that I have my 4 diamonds there. What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to hold down the Shift key as I click and drag on the diamond. So I want to make this so it has a hard 90-degree corner and not this corner radius up on top. So I hold down the Shift key and I click and drag going this way, and notice how that's isolated. Just like that, click and drag that, going this direction, and now that's isolated. And now you can see I have a very different look and feel for my image and my corners. All right, so really nice we can do that. And the last thing I want to show you is you can always come over to this little corner section, and notice how this is underlined. It's underlined telling me that I can actually click on it, and when I do that, you're going to see it allows me to then pretty much do a lot of what I just did in terms of adjusting each individual corner, upper left, lower right, etc. And then I can make it so it's just going to do them independently however I want to. So just keep in mind you can either link them all together or unlink them, and then they will do them independently, or they'll do them all collectively, depending on what you want to do. So this is going to be unlinking them, and then if I want to make this one kind of grow a little bit more, it's going to be separate from the rest of them. Maybe if I choose the preview button, and you can see this will then increase or decrease what that's going to look like. All right, so up to you. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. Okay, so really nice you can work with that. All right, now the last thing I want to talk about here is working with our display options. Okay, so if I come down to, let's just say, this image right here, I know that this is a high quality image, but it's not coming forth as such. So what's going on here, right? It looks a little bit jagged and such, but I know it's actually a really good image. So what's actually happening here? Well, InDesign is trying to save my processing power by saying, hey, you know what? We're not going to show you the whole image because it's a very, very big file and your computer can only handle so much. So we're just going to give you sort of like, the facade of what this image is. But If I right click on this, I want you to notice there's this display performance. And notice it's typical display, and that's going back to where my preferences are. And at the end of this whole course, we're going to learn how we can manipulate it on a application level. But what I'm going to choose now is, instead of typical display, I'm going to choose high display, high quality display. Now, fast display, if your computer keeps crashing, you get a lot of really high resolution images, you may want to just say fast display. I know what it looks like. Eventually, when you print it out or when you publish it, it'll be totally fine. But for the time being, you only want to display it very quickly. But I'm going to go ahead and choose high quality display, and you'll notice what it did there. Much cleaner edges there, and this is actually how the image looks. So I'm able to change that right there on the fly for this particular image. Maybe I'm showing it to a client who's peeking over my shoulder. They say, hey, how come my images aren't coming through? I can very easily right click and go to display performance. Okay, very good. So now let's go ahead and pause the video, practice this, do some of these great tools, converting our shapes and doing all this good stuff. And then after this, we're going to do a quick little lesson on working with the links panel. All right, and we'll see you soon. In this lesson, we are going to talk about the links panel. So let's define what the links panel is and how it can help us. So the links panel is essentially like a library that is going to house all of the images that we have placed in. But not only does it do that, it's going to tell us the properties of those images, and it's also going to tell us if some of those images are missing. So let's go ahead and explore that. So if your links panel is not open, you can always go to the window menu and then just simply bring up links. I have mine up available here. I'm just going to go ahead and click on that and then just drag it so it's going to be over there by itself, but also a little bit taller so I can see all the information and all the utility that the links panel can give to me. So let's just go ahead and do that. Now, if we take a look, for example, I'm on this page where I have my Forno image that I brought in. And when I click on that, you're going to see here, there is my image right there, and it tells me what page it's on. But if I click and drag and go up to the top here, you can see I have a number of images here. And some of these are going to have some question marks. But if I want to go to these very quickly and easily, if I'm not sure about what they are, for example, I'm going to click on number 16. I know I have that one. That one works. We've looked at that one. That's great. That shows me that. Okay, fantastic. Now, not only is it showing me where the image is, that it exists, so there's no problems with it, but it also shows me the name of the image, the format of the image, what page it's on, also the size of the image, the PPI, or the pixels per inch. So I know what kind of quality I'm looking at. So if it's coming in where it's not good quality, I know what's happening here. So this is information on many levels. You can see all kinds of good stuff there. You can check that out. You click on all of these and you can see, great, that works wonderfully. All right, now let's see what we can do if we have some issues here. Now, if I look way down here, you'll notice I have 13 errors. And a lot of these errors have to do with these question marks because InDesign cannot find those files. Those files have been moved, they've been renamed, maybe they just don't exist anymore, who knows. So if I double click on that now, going back to my pre-flight, you're going to see here I've got some missing links. And you can see I click on that and it's all these guys that are now listed over here. So these guys are kind of in sync with each other, so you can see some of these things there. So let's go try to find, like, for example, this HP tulip icon. I'm going to go ahead and close this out and let's just find that. Now, this is saying it's on page 5, and if I were to go over to here, I'll be able to find on page 5 that this is what I'm looking for. Now, somebody moved it. Like, uh-oh, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to find this? Well, within your links panel, you're going to see that there's this option to relink. All right, so what I'm going to do is go to the new folder where I know it got moved to. So I click on that. It's going to take me back into my computer. I'm going to go over here to Images, go over here to Illustrations, and lo and behold, there is my HP Tulip Icon AI file, which is really great. So that's going to really help me out because now I'm resyncing them up. Okay, now, you'll also notice there is this option to search for missing links in this folder, because you know what? These other two guys could also be missing in action, and then this is going to help us find it because this choice is chosen there, and it's going to allow us to then have a few less errors. So I don't have to do this one by one. It's going to save me a lot of time. So now I'm just resyncing this up, and now relinking. All right, found a relinked one missing link. Okay, that's great. And I went from 13 to 11. Okay, that's great. And now I don't have an error message anymore. All right, and this is going to come up for you. I can guarantee it, especially when you're working on a team, you're collaborating. You just need to know what is missing, where things are. Because when you finally do print it and you do packaging, and we're going to talk about this at the end, you're going to need to package up all of these images. And when you do package, and you don't have all the right images, you might not get the highest resolution of your images because it's going to be just sort of a shadowy version of what you want to produce. Okay, so that's a really important thing to understand as to why we need to have our links active and updated. Okay, so just a little bit about our links panel, and maybe just one more thing let's explore. If I go back over to here to my panel menu, let's go over to here to our panel options, and then just note how you can change things where you can make it so you have large rows. Click OK. And you can see that can be a little bit better to view. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit wider, and now I can actually see my image a little bit better. Let's go ahead and check out some of our other panel options, where you can say, hey, you know what? I'd actually like to, in my thumbnails, show the name in the column, right? That's great. Or maybe you don't, right? Maybe it's not relevant for you. It's just taking up a lot of space. Maybe you want to show the link info in there, right? When you activate that, you can do that. And then what other options are going to be important to you? Maybe size is really, really important, right? All these other things are going to be really, really important. You have all the choices in the world to do that. Okay, so as photographers, as graphic designers, some of these things are going to be very valuable as you're creating all this content and you want to know information about it. Let's go ahead and click. I'll just add on one more. Click on OK. And now you can see when I make this nice and wide, there's some good information here, so I don't have to go down here to access it. All right, so really a lot of flexibility and really a lot of value to working with the links panel, so just understand that. All right, so let me go ahead and just dock this back from whence it came. Fantastic. And excellent. Practice that, and we'll see you in the next lesson, everybody. In this lesson, we are going to discuss alignment options. So sometimes you want to align images, you want to align text, you want to align shapes, any kind of object on the screen. You might want to make it so they're going to be flush left, or maybe you want to align them on the top. Other times you also want to distribute your objects. So let's take a look at this document here where I have these icons here. Now all I'm going to do is just simply select the objects that I want to align. So you'll notice here when I select this one, I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and you're going to notice a couple of things. First of all, I get this nice little bounding box, and you can see that those are now selected. Now, if you look way over here in the upper right, you're going to see that I have all these alignment options available to me. And if you move your mouse over them, you're going to see this is going to say align left, this is going to be align right, etc. So you can just see all those there. Now, in addition to that, you will see that we do have an alignment panel. So I'm going to bring mine up over here. You can see here's a line. Bring that over there. Now, if you don't see it, you have to go back to the window menu, come over here to the object and layout choice, and then choose align. Okay, so very easy to have that there. So I'm going to keep this up here, but just know that you have some overlap. Now this align panel has a few more options here like distributing and a few other distributing options as well. All right, so really up to you. Now, very simply, I want to align these so their tops meet. All right, so you can see, what is this one? What is that one? Let me see, what is that one? Oh, there you go, align top edges. And just like that, those are in fact aligned. Now, there are some kind of nuances to alignment, and especially within this panel, because sometimes if it doesn't work the way that you asked it to do it, and it's aligning it, let's say for example, inside of the whole page or the spread, it could be because this choice here, where it says align to, is not the correct choice. So when I click on that, you'll notice it says align to selection. And that's exactly what I want. And that's exactly why it did what it did. But you could see here that it might align to the margins, align to the page, align to the spread. All right, so it's really up to you. So as an example, let's say I wanted this thing like perfectly in the center of the page. So I'm going to go ahead and select this. I'm going to say align to page. Then I center it, and you can see how it's perfectly aligned that way. And I'm going to go ahead and horizontally do that, and you can see that's perfectly aligned there. All because of what I told it to align to. So just keep that in mind, that there is some kind of extra parameters you have to pay attention to. All right, so now let's go ahead and do a few more things here. I'm going to go ahead and select these 1, 2, and 3, but this time I'm going to go ahead and marquee over all 3 of these, right? So marquee means I'm going to use my selection tool and then just click and drag over them like that. I'm not touching any one per se. I'm just starting from the outside and just clicking and dragging just like that. And then bam, you have that. And now what do I want to do? I want to align to selection and left align. And you can see perfect. They are now set up. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for these. I'm going to go ahead and left align that. Great. And now, guess what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and align these. So they're top aligned. Beautiful. Go ahead and marquee over these, top align, and look at that. Perfectly splayed out columns. All right. Now, one thing you may want to do is work with guides. All right. So guides and alignment are really kind of meant to be in the same conversation. Okay. Because this was really nice. This was really easy to do, as you can see. But many times you want to kind of get yourself kind of set up so you know exactly where things should be, whether it's you or you have another designer, that you know, okay, you know what, all our icons actually need to be like right there on the edge of the F for Fabio. So how do I create guides, first of all? Well, I'm going to turn all the lights on, if you will, just by hitting the W key like I showed you a few lessons back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag from my ruler and bring in a guide. Now, if your ruler's not set up, you can always go to your properties panel and you can turn on the ruler just like that. And now watch as I create a guide. I'm just going to simply move my mouse right on top of the ruler and click and drag. Do you see that? How it's kind of giving birth to something? I'm going to go right to the edge, right there. I have to be a little bit, maybe if I zoom in a little bit, that should work. Okay, and then I could probably even like nudge that a tiny bit. I'm just selecting it and then using my arrow keys. Perfect. Now, I can then drag these and then make them all go right against the guide. See that? Now, mine is kind of snapping-ish, so I'm going to make sure that they're always going to snap, because you do want to have snap to guide if you're working with this, kind of properly. So how do I do that? If I go over here to View, and I'm going to come down here to Grids and Guides, I'm going to make it so snap to guides is set up. Okay, because if I don't, then it's going to be a little bit more kind of slippery. I want all my objects that I have selected to be snapping to the guides. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to have that all set up now. All right, so I have that there. And then just for fun, let's create another one. On the other side, I'll just come right to the edge of the S. Go ahead and do that. And then just have that snap right into place. Perfect. And you can see the little magic line appears there as well. Okay, great. Now let's do one last thing. I'm going to kind of mess things up a little bit on purpose. I'm just going to go ahead and just make this come down a little bit. What I'd like to do is do some kind of like even distribution of my content. All right, so notice how there's some kind of like, I'll just kind of mess this up a little bit again. I just want to have like this is spaced out with this the same way that this is spaced out with this. All right, so all 3 of them have an even distribution. So let's just first of all make them left aligned. That's really easy to do. And now what I'm going to do is go over to see where it says distribute object. And just like with my alignment, I'll see that I have all kinds of different choices. Do you want to distribute? Got to wait for it to load up there. Distribute top edges, distribute vertical centers, distribute bottom edges, or maybe going in the opposite direction. You can see all those with horizontal. Now this might be kind of a spicy taste for you, but let me just try out the first one. I click on that and you can see, bam, I get that perfectly, right? So because I had these all set up, there is an even amount of space just like that. Now that may not be exactly what I wanted in terms of how much space I want to use. So we're going to talk about that in a second. But I just want you to see that the distribute objects option gives us that perfect amount of space between them. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that again just for this one, so you can get a little review there, and I'll just go ahead and just kind of mess this up a little bit. And I'll just do that one. All right, and then it may not do exactly the same, let's not worry about that, but just notice how it's going to be an even distribution between 1, 2, and 3, just like how this is. All right, so that's going to be very important. So it's intentional, but it also saves you the time of having to eyeball it. All right, so now let's just go ahead and do one last exercise on distribution. And I'm going to use this guy down here, where I'm going to distribute spacing, and I'm going to decide how much spacing I want to distribute by. And currently it's set up to be 0 inches of how the distribution is going to be set. But I need to make those parameters very exact of how far apart I want these distributed. Okay, so I'm going to say maybe about 1/2 inch. So I'm going to highlight everything, and then I'm just going to change this to 1/2 inch, 0.5 inches, and then I execute. So just like how I did my different spacing here, I'm going to do it right here. And you can see I now have control over how much distribution there's going to be. Let's do the same thing for this one here. And then it's still set up. I do that, and now it's perfect. Okay? And just a special note, this can be done with shapes, with text and text boxes, any kind of image, any kind of object you have at all. You can align, distribute, have all these parameters on there to give you that level of perfection. You can also have these guys all work with your guides, have them snap to the guides, and have that level of layout control. All right, so practice that, and we'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we are going to discuss layers. Layers in InDesign is very, very important. It's good for organization. It's good for arrangement. It's good for collaboration. Now, wanted to say one thing is that many people, when they work with InDesign, never touch the layers panel. So I'm not encouraging that, but I just want you to know that if you're not going to work with the layers panel, it's totally okay. But it is very good for organization. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this document, and we're going to see how this document is organized, and we're going to see how we can play around with the layers panel to modify it, add to it, delete it, and also again get organized with our layers to really see the value of working with layers. So I'm going to bring up my layers panel right over here. Again, if it's not available to you, just go to Window and bring up Layers. And I'm going to bring this back over to here. I'm going to dock my alignment back over there. Now, you're going to see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 parent layers. So what do I mean by that? Well, if I click on icons, for example, I have a whole bunch of sub layers within there. Okay, so for all these different icons that I have inside of there. Okay, great. So if I go to text, you'll see here I have page 6, page 7, and I have some other content that's inside there. That's all the text that's on this particular page. Okay, when you start a new document, for example, I'm just going to go back over here to my Fabio's Flavors document. We can see here this has some content on there, but let's go ahead and take a look at that. One layer, but a whole bunch of content on there. Okay, let's go back to icon alignment. Notice this one just says layer 1, and that's it, but there's a whole bunch of children living inside there. So this is an example of a very unorganized type of layer panel, right? For a particular type of document, there are no sort of sub-layers to organize our content. So if we come back to our proposal, you're going to see here how this is organized by text, by icons, by images, and also potentially if you have some other kind of bottom shapes. This is all really up to you how you want to organize your content. This is really just to give you some ideas on how you can work with it. All right, so let me just go ahead and, for example, I'm going to go ahead and go to my images. And you can see here I have my tiramisu, and I've got my flower, and I've got my market stand. Now, when I click on the layer, I just want you to notice that when I select on it, if you're used to programs like Photoshop, it does not get selected here. the way to select an object by using your layers panel is to select this little square right there. So when I click on that, notice how this gets red, and red is the color of this layer, and then this gets highlighted, and then notice the bounding box for this is also red. So watch again, if I click on flower, tiramisu is still selected. Market stand, tiramisu is still selected. If I wanted to select the market stand, I would then click on the square, and then that gets highlighted, and it becomes the active layer. All right, so kind of unintuitive if you ask me. So just keep that in mind because that might kind of throw you for a loop a little bit. Okay, now let's say, for example, I wanted to rename these. Okay, I'll just call this something else like vines. Okay, so all we're going to do now in order to rename layers is very simply just do kind of like a slow motion double click. I click once on it, click it again, wait for it to light up, okay, and I'm just going to call this vine stand. I hit return, and then bam, you can see now that's a whole different layer. Okay, very good. So hopefully all that stuff makes sense. Now we're going to talk about how we can create new layers in just a little bit, okay, but it's very important to see how a pre-existing document is already created. So let me come back over here to this icon alignment that we just did in the previous exercise, and I'm going to start bringing in a whole bunch of new content. For example, right, I have all these right here, these icons, and I have my title up on top there, but I might want to bring in some other text elements. So I'm going to show you something kind of neat. I'm just going to go ahead and bring in a text box, and I'm just going to do just one just like that. And from here, I'm going to do some text placeholder, right? Because I don't have any text right now. So if I go over to here to type, I'm going to come way down to the bottom and say fill with placeholder text. And you can see that's really nice. It saves me the time of having to actually type it out. And I have some urgency to know how this is going to lay it out. So that actually really helps. Okay, very good. So now I have that all set up. Now the next thing I'm going to do is show you some really cool ways to clone our objects. Okay, so we're going to clone by holding down the Alt or Option key, and also we're going to hold down the Shift key, because what the Option key does, or the Alt or Option key does, it clones it, and the Shift key keeps it aligned. Okay, so let me do that one more time without talking. Bam, perfect. Look at that, beautiful. And you can see how that's a huge time saver. So anytime you want to clone something, anytime you want to even align it, you do your Alt or Option key. Now, let's see what's going on in my layers panel. Believe it or not, a whole bunch of stuff just came up here. So things are starting to get a little bit unruly, and I need to start organizing all of this content. Okay, so I want to have a layer for my text, and I want to have a layer for my icons. So what do? I'm going to click on, first of all, this Create New Layer, and now I'm going to see I have two layers. One is called Layer 2, one is called Layer 1, one is going to be red, and one is going to be blue. All right, but I need to rename these, just like how I saw with my icons and my images on that last document. I'm going to go ahead and just call this one Text, and I'm going to call this one Images. So slow motion double click, very good. And now I need to have these guys, since this is text, go up into the text layer. So I'm going to go ahead and just hold down my Shift key and then just simply click and drag. So now it's out of there, and now I'm nicely organized with this. And you'll notice that the other thing that happens is that the bounding box is now the same color as this layer. Okay, it's now red. I'm going to talk about how we can change that in a little bit, but you can see how nice and easy this is. Okay, and this guy also needs to be up there, so I'm going to go ahead and drag that up here. That's going to be on top. Cool. Now that is feeling and looking really good, and I have this other one here. I'm going to make this is just going to be like shapes. So let's go ahead and create another new layer called shapes, and that's my rectangle. Drag that in there, open that up. I'm going to rename that so it's no longer called rectangle. I'll just call this side binding. Great. Now I am super happy with this. Okay, so let's go ahead and I can minimize these, right? So it's not taking up so much space. I can maximize one at a time if I like as well. So let's take a look at some of the other kind of like minutia around working with our layers panel. So you see here I have these little eyeballs here. That's all about visibility. Sometimes you want something to just sort of disappear temporarily. You can very easily do that. So if I don't want to see any of the text, for example, I could just simply click on that eyeball and all the text goes away. See that? All 4 elements then become invisible, but I can always bring them back. If I want to only make Fabio's flavors disappear, I can very easily do that, independent of all the rest of them. Okay? The other thing you might want to do is lock your layers. You can't see them here, but this little invisible column right there will allow me to lock a layer. Well, why do I want to lock a layer? Sometimes you're accidentally clicking on something. There's sort of competing elements. So let me go back to like my proposal template, and I'm going to go to here, and you'll notice that like, oh, I keep trying to like click on this and then this guy moves, right? Something like that. So I'd want to lock this shape layer so I don't accidentally, like, oh man, I keep trying to move this text and this keeps moving, right? There's competing elements. So very easily now I can then lock this. See that? Now this is locked, and as hard as I try, I cannot move it. Okay, so just keep that in mind if you try to do that and you need to lock it. Very easily you can lock it, and then of course you can unlock it just the same. Okay, so very cool. Let's come back to here, and then this time let's do a little bit of color coding. All right, so I'm going to work with my text layer right here. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to kind of come over here to the right-hand side and double-click very quickly. See that? I'm not double-clicking on the text. I'm coming over here to the right-hand side of it so I can get these layer options that appear here. So number 1, this is going to give me the choice to change the layer name, of course, if I want to. Here is the ability to change the color of my layer. So let's go ahead and make that orange. All right. Then we get a whole bunch of other options here, like do you want to show the layer? That's pretty much the same thing as the eyeball. Do you want to lock the layer? Right? Same thing as what we saw in that second column. Print the layer. Well, sometimes you don't want to have certain layers get printed. A good example is let's say you're looking at something that's just old and you're bringing it into this document and you just want to sort of model after that old, let's say a map, or a guide or a chart or something like that, or just old text. And you're just using that as just sort of like a reference. You don't want it to print when the time comes, but it needs to be there. So you can just say, hey, you know what? Don't print this layer. I want it there as a reference, but when I print it, please don't print it. So it won't print. Okay? We talked about guides, right, earlier in another lesson. Maybe you want to show the guides or not show the guides on that layer. And do you want to lock the guides? So therefore you can't move them around like I did earlier. You can't move them around. You can lock them. All right, so lots of good options there. So I'm going to go ahead and just say okay. And now these are orange, that's orange, and looks really good. All right, so I'm feeling pretty happy about that. One last thing I want to show you is about kind of stacking order of things. All right, let's go back to our proposal here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create kind of like a little bit of a kind of a collage, if you will, with these. Okay, let's just go ahead and do something like that. This may not be the way I want things ordered. You see this? How this is going over that, and maybe even like these lines here. Maybe you want these to be kind of in a different order. So the layering is very literal, where the top layer, whether it's the actual parent layers or the children layers, they need to be in a certain order in order for them to be presented as forward or in the back. So let's just work with the images, really simple. So you can see I want to have my tiramisu below the flower. So what I'm going to do is make sure it's selected and then just simply drag it below, and you can see just like that, that's now below it. It's as easy as that, right? Very intuitive, hopefully very linear. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for my vine stand, and I'm going to make that go above the flower. Drag that up. All right, and there you go. And I actually don't like that, so I can very easily bring that back, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so you really want to practice this. Take a look at some other documents maybe that you've inherited, but very, very valuable tool for organizing, for collaborating, for communicating, and just really saving yourself a lot of time because everything is already organized, everything is labeled, some things are going to be hidden, some things are going to be locked, some things will be color-coded. it is an incredibly valuable tool.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To get the files the instructor used in this tutorial and follow along, click over there. And click over there to watch more videos on YouTube from Simon Says It.